Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would be operating in an observing capacity, witnessing the events that would unfold, but absent of participation. For as the real awareness that we all are is a part of the isness, which is the everything reality, there is nothing that the isness is not, including all the ideas of consciousness that effect into every creational position and happenstance in the simulator. The isness real awareness animates through all consciousness, and has access, therefore, to the entirety of its design, which allows the potentiality of each personal self to be shown anything transpiring throughout multi-dimensional creation. This can be so, absent of direct involvement, the sense of being present as the situations and events occur, but not as a part of the simulation, not presenting a simulated form by which participants of the experience being witnessed can relate to and engage with. Where it is necessary to insert a form into the experience is where we seek to effect alteration to it in some shape or form, or to engage with the participants for whatever reason we may have for doing so. That as it is the ideas that manifest the simulated occurrences, should these ideas be embraced, agreed with, we become as a part of the effects, as though momentarily having access to a particular game as we download the files pertaining to it to our computers, and where an avatar becomes available that we can participate. In the case of our real side activities, the real awareness will formulate a vessel or form by which we operate within the situations where insertion is deemed necessary. As I mentioned in the beginning, I would be simply observing events unfolding on the physical level Earth, and this then would present as a potential future scenario involving all of humanity. The idea of it already present within the consciousnesses of all involved, that it could then be shown to the personal self. All ideas that have been created and agreed with will be in effect in the nowness of the isness reality, but through the design of a consciousness that incorporates time and space ideas, which present as a delay factor so the effects are not immediate, physical level-wise, as they are in reality, but take the moments they will to process and be actualized. Which of the ideas will become as a physical level manifested, dependent on those held in prominence over all others, as though every idea consciousness placed were a movie on the shelf, each movie already complete and on the DVD, but only certain of the movies are being watched at any given moment. Movies we watch that also are complete, but must be processed through to a conclusion through our DVD players, the ideas held in prominence, processed through the consciousness apparatus that affords the unfolding physical level simulation. Naturally then, the idea must be retained in prominence. The movie must remain in the DVD player until its conclusion should the final events or effects be experienced, and should another idea become the agreed and held to forerunner, so we have in essence switched the DVD for another, and our new movie now is processing to its culmination effect point. As such, all that we are shown in regards to individuals and entire species such as humanity are potentialities, all according ultimately to what the individual or species decides, which ideas of their respective consciousness are held to over all others until a physical level manifestation. My initial view would present situations occurring globally and seemed to center around specific young teenagers. On the surface, they appeared as human as any other individual of their age bracket, but as I continued to observe, so would these certain teenagers seem to be endowed with extraordinary abilities, possessing of lightning-fast reactions, speed, agility, and unnatural strength. The number of these enhanced teenagers in relation to the rest of humanity was very slight, almost negligible, literally but a handful in every city and town of the world, but their numbers were gradually increasing as time passed. As an example, I would observe one of these gifted teenagers in the company of his partner, a normal human female, and where he would be accosted by another aggressive normal teen, the aggressor far larger and a number of years older, but the enhanced teenager would bring his attributes to bear and put down his assailant with effortless ease. Interestingly, his partner and his attacker were aware of his extraordinary physical abilities, for indeed they were neither unsurprised or shocked when he demonstrated them in the besting of his assailant. And curiously, this gifted teenager and many of his kind globally insisted on wearing a kind of half-mask that had the appearance of a dinosaur head, specifically a raptor. Impressions would now reveal explanation as to these enhanced and gifted teens, for as it transpired, a hybrid program had been implemented and indeed executed. These enhanced teenagers were the products of this hybrid program, one that incorporated two species, that of human and reptilian. The reptilians have a penchant where hybridization is concerned. They have meshed many species that serve various functions, and indeed the human race is a genetically altered species, its original form that of a kind of ape, though enhanced with a certain infusion of reptilian genetics and taking the design we see today. I have been shown a number of real-side experiences over the years where the reptilians were endeavouring to create further human-reptilian hybrids and position them on the Earth, and there are as many hybrid programs in operation with variations on the specifics, as there are the overall intents of the reptilian factions behind the orchestrating of such projects, with some ill-intended and others quite the opposite and that seek a collaboration with humanity. Impression suggested that in this real side experience, this was indeed an effort to forge a peaceful alliance with the human race, as though a tentative step that would ultimately allow the acceptance of the reptilians without scorn, fear, or rebuttal. That as the Dark Force reptilians oversee humanity, theoretically with this particular potential future view occurrence, the ill-intended controllers must have been removed, or their ability to orchestrate humanity's affairs lessened, that allowed for this insertion of the hybrids into humanity, an operation that wasn't designed for humanity's detriment. A step-by-step integration seemingly, for it soon became apparent as to the abilities of a small proportion of the most recent generation of children, and although a curiosity, this was ultimately accepted, though not necessarily with open arms, as my example earlier would testify to. I was reminded a little of the X-Men movie series, where those endowed with extraordinary powers would also receive scorn, suspicion, and mistrust from the rest of humanity. Although the exact nature of the enhanced teenagers, the age group they now were as this view opened, was never made apparent to humanity, humans were unaware that these individuals were human reptilian hybrids and had been placed within human society by the reptilians who had created them. The idea was that eventually all would be revealed, and very likely the reptilians themselves would make themselves known. As I mentioned, this appeared to be a potential future view scenario where the Dark Force control system had fallen, and reptilians and other species of a more benign disposition were reaching out to the now liberated human species in their own decided ways. Unfortunately, not all was going according to plan, I would suggest, for there would gradually be escalation of hostility directed at these hybrids, and not all of the fault could be placed with the humans. The consciousness of the reptilians is a design rather inclined towards aggression, hence the reptilians' incessant want where conquering of others is concerned, though an inclination being lessened and moderated as moments pass, with vast numbers of reptilians now stepping up and electing to become more aware, etc., and attempting to involve themselves in collaboration efforts such as this project as revealed here, a consciousness construct that must rather be managed as though being stuck with a defective computer that we just have to deal with, and in regards to this hybrid program, this would involve the influx of a greater proportion of reptilian genetics in relation to that which was human. The result of such would be a far more enhanced body form with heightened agility, speed and strength, though still maintained as overall human on the surface, but additionally would these hybrids be far more aggressively predisposed than your typical normal human, with the extra infusion of reptilian genetics they each comprised of, more apt to emotionally and indeed aggressively react. And this became a progressively volatile state of affairs globally, to the extent that there was a serious consideration as to the implementation of measures where these enhanced humans might be contained, segregated from humanity, or even destroyed. As I mentioned, humanity were unaware that these troublesome teenagers were reptilian human hybrids. They were considered simply an anomaly. but as a moments passed, so another variable would enter the equation, which did nothing to de-escalate the mounting tensions between the hybrids and the human race. If this was unforeseen by the reptilian hybrid creators or not, wasn't made apparent, but as the hybrid teenagers continued to develop, as they reached a certain age, although generally they retained an external human appearance, under certain light conditions, it's as though their skin would appear scaled. This latest development soon became publicly known, and the hybrids now were treated with even more hostility, to the extent of being openly attacked and killed by the human masses. That despite their superior strength, their numbers were still marginal in relation to humanity, their body forms just as susceptible to damage as humans, and being mobbed by large human groups was becoming an increasing occurrence. As an example, 2 human hybrids would be making use of a bus. They would be immersed in a fierce argument among themselves, and as they descended into a physical altercation, due to their extreme body form strength, they managed to flip the bus on its side. The other human passengers would form as a mob and pursue the hybrids through the streets, their numbers increasing as other humans joined them, hounding the 2 hybrids into a building, which they would proceed to barricade and ultimately set fire to, burning to death the hybrids trapped within it. Perhaps the reality of these enhanced teenagers being reptilian hybrids would reveal why many of them chose to wear crafted masks that had the appearance of raptors, as I mentioned earlier. Impressions revealed the hybrids were just as unaware of their true origins and the source of their powers as the human race were, but evidently were drawn to that which was in association with their nature, reptilian imagery, the compulsion to adorn raptor masks, etc. The overall situation with the hybrids and humanity had developed to this volatile point. How it would proceed from there was according to that which all involved decided. Perhaps the hybrids would be extracted by their reptilian creators, as they were now at a stage of being hounded and eradicated, and it was no longer safe for them to remain. Or maybe the reptilians would engage with humanity directly and attempt to de-escalate the situation, if that was indeed possible, as this was the ultimate intention, that of tentatively making themselves known to humanity as a species, and for whatever reason this hybrid project was decided to be executed also as part of this exercise, as disastrous as it turned out to be. The scene now would switch to one prior to the influx of these hybrids into human society. Up until this moment, it would be assumed the hybrids were the offspring of normal humans, and that the reptilians must have interceded in the process, ensuring the babies that certain mothers birthed would be these hybrids. But instead, it appeared that the reptilians, orchestrating this hybrid program, had initiated contact with certain humans by whatever means this was achieved, and had provided them each with what appeared to be a small technological capsule. That at a certain prearranged moment, so these selected humans would activate the capsule, which was designed to create these hybrids, as though a version of artificial in vitro reproductive technology. These selected humans would be designated as the guardians of the hybrids, assisting in their integration into society, though the hybrids' consciousness was such that very formidable was their sense of survival orientation. They all would be very adaptable, versatile, and their ability to be successful in whatever they chose to do was somewhat guaranteed. As it transpired, I would be one of those the reptilians had approached, and had been provided the capsule that would give rise to a hybrid. And although, had this indeed transpired on the physical, absent of being shown all that would follow, the hostilities between the hybrids and humanity, I would not have considered the ramifications of such action. But in this experience, having been witness to all the mayhem that had ensued, I would find myself sat with my capsule and deliberating over its activation in light of what had been revealed. There the experience would end. As I said, it is a potential set of circumstances dependent on agreement as to if it becomes a physical level actualized, but an overall scenario where the dark force control system no longer was in place in regards to humanity, and where peaceful collaboration between other species, the reptilians included, was taking place, or at least the attempting of such, but where perhaps the implementation of certain projects prove not to be the most prudent of decisions.